Well, I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
We're going to take a close look at what Musk had said on the Joe Rogan program. We're going to break it down as to what his arguments are, where they're coming from, look at the actual numbers. And then I'm going to try to convince you, Joe, perhaps that it's actually worse than what Musk is saying. It's worse than a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, geez. Great. More good news.
Yeah. So, get your chin, hook up that chin strap. We're diving in.
Let's do it.
But first, let's just talk real quick, skip ahead if you like, what a Ponzi scheme is. Just imagine a bunch of clients get together, they pool their money so that a fund manager can go and invest it and try to earn a return on the investment. Now, imagine if that fund manager took that money and they invested it entirely in treasuries or something, and they got 4%. But then every quarter, when he goes and makes a status report of the fund to all the investors, to all of his clients, he goes and he shows them a report and he says, look, he doesn't write the 4%. He says, oh, you're earning 8%, right? Which is really good. That's where the fraud happens. Now, most clients will see that and then be posed a question. Do you want to keep your money in here and continue earning 8%, maybe 10, or do you want to take it out? Now, most people, when they see that, they'll say, well, just leave it in. We'll leave the money in. But a couple of them might decide to leave. That's not a problem. You can pay them out the, whatever they put in plus 8%, not the 4% that you actually gained. And you can pay them with that money with money from the other investors. And you can keep this going so long as the old money and the new money exceeds the money that's going out. But obviously, eventually this falls apart because there's just not as much money as he says there is. And then the last one's out, they just won't get paid because there's no money left. So like a few kind of key points, kind of the new investors are paying out the old ones, and it's not sustainable. So the schemer cannot make everyone whole with kind of what he's promising them. So like Social Security is pay as you go. The Ponzi scheme, I guess, is kind of pay as you go. And I think Musk kind of touched upon that, but I think really what he's talking about is that the future obligations of Social Security just far outweigh the tax revenue.
Like if you look at the future obligations of Social Security, it far exceeds the tax revenue. Far. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is like double what people think it is because of the future obligations.
The U.S. government publishes a financial report of itself. This is for 2024. We did an episode looking at something else in here, but about 2023. Page 6, we have the assets and the liabilities of the U.S. government. And so, these are dollars and billions. This is 2024. You can see total assets. It's an impressive 5.6 trillion. But then you look at the liabilities. So this is Musk's first points. This first one down here, the federal debt and interest payable, is essentially what we all think of as the national debt. This is the number that people throw around when they start quoting what our debt is. It is the current outstanding, treasury bill and note market. At the end of 2024, we're looking at around 28 trillion. So this is the debt that everyone talks about. Now, Musk says it's actually more like double this. And he's referring to all these other liabilities that are also on the U.S. government's books. Now, the one here, though, he's looking at federal employee and veteran benefits payable. So what this is referring to, it's federal employee pensions. So now the idea of a pension has, it used to be very common, including in the private sector, but it's since, ended. I mean, that was during the days when someone would work at a company for like their entire career. They worked there for like 40 years, and that wasn't unusual. Nowadays, people are bouncing around every couple of years or whatever. But there's still pensions. They still exist. And there needs to be some sense, some accounting of the liabilities. Like how much do we still owe? And this is their estimate. But, and this is kind of the scary part. He said, Musk said in relation to this, that it was, the liabilities were double. And he was speaking in the context of Social Security. But this does not include Social Security. Okay, think about that for a second. Social Security is not on here yet. What do you think it is, Joe? If you were to guess, what do you think? Let's take it two things. One is, spoiler alert, we're not projected to actually cover all of the obligations. So there's a deficit. So what do you think the deficit is until the end of the century. And then what do you think the total just liabilities? So not the deficit, but just the total liabilities.
Well, let's start with just the liabilities. So so federal employee and veteran benefits payable, 15 trillion. Is that just federal government pensions and like military services and things like that? Just to get a sense of scale.
Yep.
Because Social Security would be, I don't know, well, at least as large as that, I would think. Probably maybe not twice as large. So I don't know, 30 trillion ish area.
Okay.
20 to 30.
That's total. And then the deficit, how much do you think we're short?
It's a good question because so this is against the annual tax receipts and then
for the Social Security program. Don't think too much about it. Just what's kind of your gut feeling? I know you want to I see you busting out Excel I know, already. I can see you opening Excel from here, Joe.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand it, but I mean, we're trying to solve this right here.
They already give us. So this is the other thing, right? Because this isn't some third party guy in a basement kind of figuring it. This is the government themselves telling you that there's a huge problem here, that there's a deficit. Mm-hmm. This isn't, we're not trying to figure anything out. I'm just reporting to you what they told us, that this is not in the current conversation. So they said for the longest time, for several presidential cycles, let's put it that way. They just would not talk about Social Security. Nobody, so at one point you could say the Republicans are worried about it because they're supposed to be fiscally conservative. The Democrats, they wouldn't talk about it. No one's talking about it now. And then it's a serious problem. And so I think I kind of taken this opportunity, what Musk went online and went on Rogan and sort of raised this issue. I'm taking the chance now to kind of hook it into something that I've been worried about and look into these actual numbers myself. So that's what we're doing here. But yeah, why don't we just skip ahead? Let's go to, so in the same report, this report's you can see here 245 pages. It's public. Go take a look. It's a fun read. So they have a separate carve out, as you can imagine, for social insurance. This is kind of interesting. You can see the total name of the programs. So, the Social Security, Medicare, Railroad Retirement, and Black Lung. So you can see over the years how some of these have come together. But regardless, now, according to for Social Security, and in their purposes, they also include Medicare in here. They're talking the social insurance future expenditures in excess of future revenues. And they come to 78.3 trillion. And so that's kind of the number that they cite around in most of the reports. It's what the deficit is, so to speak, over the entire length of the program.
And so what is the entire length of the program?
I think goes to 2098, something like that. Just to take a step back for a second and talk about just general accounting rules. What they're trying to estimate here is how much currently, given the current population of the United States, what we can make some assumptions about when people retire, how long they live, how much they're paying out in Social Security now per paycheck or whatever. You can start to get a figure around how much are we going to have to pay through it over a certain period of time. And that period of time is about to the end of the century. Now, what they try to estimate this every year. And every year there are going to be some small changes that happen in their assumptions. These assumptions are going to impact what the total liabilities, how much they owe. Demographic data, for instance, is a big one. They have slightly lower, assumed birth rates. So that's one of the ones that kind of Musk mentioned.
Basically, people are living way longer than expected. There are fewer babies being born. So you have more people who are retired and that live for a long time. They also need to try to account for historical population data, immigration, divorce data, fertility, all sorts of stuff. It's very complex. And in this table, they're just providing the deltas, the impact of these changes in assumptions that happen from 2023 to 2024.
So I just wanted to call that out because Musk mentioned it, and this is what he's talking about. If you want to actually see the numbers, we're getting to your question, Joe. I promise.
Yeah, no, so I'm just trying to study that table a little bit.
You got any questions or observations? If you have an observation and you don't like it, we can always edit it out. So go for it.
Yeah, bashful.
I'm trying to be mindful of
what changes in valuation period. What does that first one mean? Okay, so over 75 years, net of all tax receipts projected over the 75-year window, we're going to come up 78 trillion short compared to what we thought was going to be 76 trillion short last year.
Yeah, that's another way to put it.
Numbers don't seem so good.
That's not great. It's not great. But the number I was kind of curious was just like that's net of revenue. So that's like, imagine you have the assets and the liabilities, and when they net out, you get a negative 78. I wanted to know just like what's the liabilities. That was the number I was kind of curious because strictly speaking, what are the liabilities? This isn't quite the answer. So United States government statements of social insurance, present day value of long range, so that's 75 years, except black lung, projections. So now they break it up, it looks like, into two sort of chunks. One are the kind of current people who are currently participating in the system. So they're either already receiving Social Security or they will. So this is, my mom, and this is me, right? I'm currently paying, I'm in the system. They're expected to pay me at some future. And I guess this closed group has to do with future participants. So these are people who are not yet paying Social Security yet, the unborn, if you will. Now we can start breaking this down by revenue and expenditures. So the people who are already receiving Social Security, 2024, they're not getting a whole lot of revenue naturally. I'm not even sure why this number isn't zero, but whatever. And they're going to be receiving 42 trillion. Participants who have not obtained eligibility age, so that's me, that's you, that's probably most of our listeners. We're still going to be putting in until I retire 74 trillion, after which we're expected to get out 144 trillion. And then you got the future participants. They look like a net positive because, presumably they're going to mostly still be working during this period. So you come out to 78. Now I want to know the liabilities. So just the liabilities. So that's going to be this 42 number, this 144 number, plus this 35 number. And that got up to 220 trillion. So almost, you wait for it, almost a quarter of a quadrillion. We did it, baby. We did it, Joe. We got a new prefix. We got a new numerical prefix, baby. We did it. We can actually say
we're just barely
of a quadrillion. I know.
Oh,
yes. This is every finance person's dream. Start using new numerical prefixes. Quarter of a quadrillion and not sound ridiculous.
Wow.
It's stupid if you're 0.01 quadrillion. No. Quarter of a quadrillion.
So even a trillion is absurd. A trillion is
1,000 trillions, baby.
Yeah.
A quarter of a quadrillion.
Wow. A trillion is a million millions. Quadrillion is a billion millions. Or a million billions. At this point, it's just so abstract.
We did it. Who cares anymore?
Yeah.
Anyway, I had fun with that.
Turn on the printing press.
Let's do it. Quarter quadrillion? How fast? Yeah, right. How fast can we denominate? How fast are those? How fast are the printer? I mean, it's not even. They don't even have to print anything. It's all digital, baby.
How fast can we process that many line items?
So I mean, that's arguably that's the liability. Now I understand for accounting reasons why they would net it out against revenue and it's not all bad because you can just bam, smash together whatever the assets are and cancel out and get some negative 78 number, which is a lot more. It's better than a quarter of a quadrillion.
It's not even a tenth of a quadrillion. Now we can deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you put it like that,
what's about a quarter quadrillion? Come on.
Yeah. So when Musk says that, they look at the liabilities, and they're like double. He was referring to that first table we saw. But if you just compare it, it's like 10x. If you, I think, strictly just look at the liabilities. Now, and we talked about this before, the whole idea of like the assets being like 5 trillion is kind of BS too, because they don't try to figure out what the present value of all future tax revenue is, which we did this on this program. And, depending on your assumptions, you could easily get to like 150 trillion. So one of the takeaways here is that government accounting is really, it's really weird. It's wonky. It's not official. There's just kind of,
isn't this doing the same thing? It's projecting out future tax receipts with,
that's a fair point. Yeah. That's exactly it. The present value of future tax receipts. Exactly.
It is really pretty scary because, it's like we talk about the national debt, Treasury market's 28 trillion, and then there's other liabilities on top. I think the total spot level today is like 35 trillion, and that's what we talk about with the debt.
Yeah. But like this total assets number is like arguably not this. It's just that it gets kind of dirty and messy when you start trying to figure out like what's the present, value of all future tax income. Like the GAAP can't really handle tax income very well, I guess,
I mean, well, both of these things are such.
Plus, like, how much is the Washington Monument worth? It's like,
yeah, I mean,
how much is Yellowstone worth?
Yeah, I don't think that stuff should be included anyway. I don't know how soon we're going to be liquidating the Washington Monument.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they like. Don't even bother trying to answer it with these in this report. They're just like, look, we're not including a whole bunch of stuff, and we're not going to try.
What are these numbers going to look like whenever Canada joins the Union?
Okay, now you're asking the real questions.
Well, I mean, like, they're going to have to undergo a America trial period where basically no output, they only pay in. That'll solve things.
Okay, so we can get even more into the nitty gritty and actually pull the 2024 annual report of the Board of Trustees of the Federal. So this is like the official name. If you want like official name of Social Security, it is Old Age and Survivors Insurance and Federal Disability Insurance Trust Funds. So those two. And but I really just wanted to show you, it's a really good report. If you really want to dive into it, but I think things are pretty well summed up in this chart. Don't say anything too witty while I'm doing this, or we'll have to. I don't know how to edit. Okay, so I think this sums up the situation pretty well. So this line right here is the income line, and this black line is the expenditure line, and this line right here is the present day. And there's a couple things that we can see here. And this is as a percent of taxable payroll. So one of the things you'll see is like how they talk about this. It's not really in absolute terms, but regardless, a few things. One is,
all right. Sorry. So in the year 2000, the first point.
So in the year 2000, before this, the costs were less than the revenue.
And right? So the cost was like 10.5% of
10.5%, and call this 12.5%. Okay.
Like, and by income, is that all tax receipts?
Yes. So we're up here, and now they're paying out at that time something less than what they were getting in. And with the difference, they were putting it, and this was going on for a long time beforehand, the difference they were putting into these trust funds, right?
Okay.
Now, 2010 is a critical year because that's the point in which it flipped. That's the point in which the money going out was greater than the money coming in. So they had to just start drawing down from their trust fund.
By like a huge margin.
Yeah. But it just, bam, the 2008, the crisis, people getting on to spill, whatever it is, these people, early retirement. I don't, it's not a coincidence that these happen around the same time. But throughout this year, there's a deficit.
That's a really good question because like at that period, at that time as well, the longer running participation rate in the labor force in the United States was something like, I think 67 or 68% pre-2009. And then 2009, it dropped to, I think, like 62 or 63 or something like that. Like it fell like substantially. A few percent on the entire workforce is, I don't know, 10 million, 20 million people, like a huge amount of people. And it's never since recovered. And in fact, it's been declining still ever
Yeah.
since.
You got to get people back to work.
And it's
But regardless,
2009, so many left and still haven't come back.
yeah.
And at this point, never will.
And, whatever, they're receiving their Social Security checks, I guess.
I mean,
And,
it's like that one, like, are those people getting Social Security? Like what's like a working age individual receiving from that? Someone who's like 30 years old in 2009 that drops out of the labor force, just never comes back.
I don't know.
I guess disability is included.
But regardless, the point is there's a deficit. And this is kind of what I mean by saying there were several presidential cycles where like this is kind of an issue, but no one wanted to talk about it because it's political suicide. I think that, as a citizenry that is socially conscious and responsible, not talking about it should be political suicide. But maybe that's just me. Still, there's a deficit.
Yeah,
and it was being funded with
it
was being funded with the trust fund. And again, there are numbers in here showing like, how much is going out there. It's pretty good. But the other thing that's
do we know how large that trust fund is over time, or like how much?
Yeah, I pulled a whole bunch of numbers. All right, let's rally off a bunch of numbers that I saw. So the Social Security net, they provided payments to 67 million people. 53 million were retired workers. 9 million were disabled workers and dependents of disabled workers. 6 million deceased workers. Now they acknowledge that these people were deceased. Maybe there's something in there about going to dependents. I don't know. So 183 million people had earnings covered by Social Security and paid payroll taxes. The total cost was 1.4 billion. 1.4 trillion. The total income was 1.35 trillion.
And this is in which year?
This was 2023.
Okay.
So the total assets reserved held in special U.S. Treasury services, so this is the fund, declined from 2.8 trillion to 2.788 trillion at the end of 2023. So those are some numbers, the size of the funds. Now, they're projecting that costs have exceeded income since 2010, and that's expected to continue going forward. The trust fund is expected to decline to about $500 billion by 2033. So now, if these are the costs, this is the amount that they have to pay out if they want to fulfill all of their social insurance obligations. That's this line. And then this line down here is their actual income. So they no longer have this trust to help fill the difference. And it's boom, they're just going to have to pay out whatever they get in. So in a way, if you look at this strictly from like, a debt thing, you've defaulted. You've not been able to fulfill your promise. This is a great graph. It tells the story. After the financial crisis, boom, costs increased, income stayed the same, running a deficit, drawing down from the trust fund all these years, expected to continue. It's going to run out in 2033, at which point you can just pay out the money that you get in, and you're not going to be able to fulfill your obligations.
It's definitely pretty scary.
Yeah, this is a big deal.
And it's like, Joe, this is like, I didn't even
listeners, viewers, we need to get like a red flag or something. You heard it here first. Quadrillion. You didn't hear it here first, but like, no one, I don't know, man. No one, I say no one cares about it, but then again, I'm talking about this because, the man with the biggest platform went on the podcast with the other guy with the biggest platform, and they talked about it. So I guess I can't really complain all that much. This stuff worries me, man. So I'm going to close this off. I'm going to kind of explain to you why I think this is worse than a Ponzi scheme. At least when it becomes known that like a fund is not going to be able to make you whole, or like when you pay into it, you're not going to get sort of what you would expect or were promised to get out of it. At least you don't have to invest. But, I looked it up. I think only for like special religious exemptions, I guess, can you decide not to pay Social Security. You have to pay Social Security. So now imagine if Bernie Madoff kind of knocked on your door and he tried to sell you Social Security. So he's like, listen, real quick, pay into this now, okay? And I'm going to go pay my earlier clients with the money that you give me. But, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to pay you back everything that you put in. What do you think? And then you're like, thanks, but no thanks. I'll pass. I'll try to do something else. And then Madoff kind of goes into his shirt pocket here and he sort of pulls out a gun and he's like, oh, no, I wasn't asking. You have to do it. I don't know, man. That's dare I say robbery. I mean, it's not as though the comparison between taxes and robbery haven't been made before. But it's tough because you're looking at these official graphs like this and you're like, you have to pay in or you go to jail. You have to pay in and you're not going to get back kind of what you were necessarily promised. Going back to what was said, is the fraud there? No, they're very transparent with the fact that they're not going to be able to pay you back, but there's nothing you can do about it. There's just kind of like, look, give us your money and then hopefully we'll figure something out. That's the deal.
And people have been saying that for decades now.
Yeah, I think they started talking about it like here in 2010 and they just stopped.
Yeah, because
now we're talking about it again now.
Not even that long ago. Like
no,
before 2009, like before 2008, like it looked good. This is like it was like they were net contributing to this additional trust fund that the government has to fund this thing.
Hi, man. Well, that's all I had.
Good luck sleeping tonight. I don't think I'm going to be able to.
I wanted to provide some more context around what Musk was saying, and I think it might be worse than how he's selling it. So, anyway,
good luck, everyone.
Good night.